So obviously good result for Chelsea there. Injury issues were very clear if you took a look at the bench, just full of young players and academy products. As for Spurs, that was their third defeat in a row. Gab Marcotti was there at the game this evening, taking a look at the standings. He'll be with us in just a moment. Spurs 7 points off Villa, but they do have a game in hand, and perhaps European football could be on the cards for Chelsea. As you can see there, they are 2 points behind Newcastle right now. Gab Marcotti at the game tonight. Where should we start, Gab? What stood out to you from this clash?
Well, obviously, all the absentees meant the options were pretty limited. I think you saw a team that's clearly suffering confidence-wise. Arsenal fans celebrating St. Totteringham's day recently, and Chelsea fans letting them know, once the game turned, once it became obvious that Chelsea were going to win. I thought it was actually quite nervy, certainly as far as the crowd were concerned for much of the first half, even though Spurs clearly weren't playing well. But then obviously Nico Jackson with that great leap, making it 2-0, and from then on, there was there's a pretty fierce rivalry here, especially Chelsea towards Spurs, and they let the visiting fans know it.
Stevie, Spurs set-piece frailties exposed once again tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Shocking. I mean, Chalobah was standing at the far post with Cucurella in front of him and no white jersey in sight. There was 4 jerseys in front of Cucurella and nobody had a look. I mean, it's one thing when you're setting up to defend a set-piece, but there has to be some leeway for, if you see something that has to be done, then you have the option to make that decision on the field. Because when you write things up on the chalkboard or whatever it is you use, it doesn't work that way. This game flows and ebbs all the time. And so at this level, you have to be able to, as a defender particularly, when you spot a situation, you have to change something. Nobody in Spurs did anything. Chalobah was free at the back post and he stuck it in the back of the net. I mean, it's just downright bad defending, but it's a fantastic header.
Postecoglou was obviously, as we saw, animated on the touchline. He was animated afterwards in the mix zone, a bit chippy with some of the questions that were put to him, particularly about the set pieces. He did want to state and reiterate that he'd actually said they're not a priority, rather than everybody making it more than it was, he said.
Well, listen, on the one hand, I do understand what Postecoglou is saying. And while set pieces, again, cost them, listen, the second set piece is just one of those things. Incredibly struck free kick from Palmer, and then only 3 players react. 2 Spurs and one Chelsea, and Nico Jackson, the 2 Spurs players, Højbjerg and Son, get in each other's way. That's totally separate from the broader discussion around set pieces with Spurs, which we saw over the weekend, we saw again tonight. And while I'm sympathising with Postecoglou in that set pieces isn't their biggest issue, especially when I can't remember Spurs having a decent chance on goal in all game long. So Postecoglou has clearly shown that he's a front-foot manager, that he wants to shape this team to attack other teams, and he's more interested in how we hurt the opponent than how maybe they hurt us. That's all well and good, and he has a lot of work to do there on tonight's evidence. But at the same time, as I said a couple of nights ago, you've got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. You cannot just play or think about how you hurt the opponent while how you're conceding goals is as soft as it is. And working on set pieces doesn't take that much in terms of time on the training ground, in terms of how long it takes for your team to get the gist of what's being asked of them. You scout the opponent, you see what they do, you know what their strengths are, and you put players in spaces to match and ask them to stick to their responsibilities. That's the simplest version of it. I'm not even getting into zonal marking and everything else about it, an aspect of the game that I don't particularly like. But if you just ask players, this is what I want you to do, this is who I want you to mark, if this happens, this is how we recover. You can do that in 15 minutes a day on the training ground or whatever it is in the build-up to a game. So I don't understand the kind of the angst about Postecoglou in terms of dealing with that or dealing with the questions that come as a result.
What would you do now if you're Postecoglou? What would you be doing to get things right again with these set pieces, with everything that's going on with your side?
Well, the set-piece one should be a straightforward situation, to be honest. But the bigger picture, if I'm Postecoglou, I'm thinking, OK, you know, we started the season all guns blazing. A lot of work, a lot of running, a lot of energy, a lot of desire and fight, yes. But this is a Tottenham side that, for the previous 2 or 3 seasons, all it's done is sort of sit tight and shuffle across and try and counter. When your game suddenly changes to this all action, all running, it's all about energy. More than as much as anything else, the way Postecoglou plays the game, it's about energy. I think he has to start thinking about whether this team has just run out of energy as much as anything else. I really don't think the desire's missing. I don't think that there's a chance that they don't know what they're supposed to do. It's a long season, and when you play the way they do, you're going to run out of energy. And I think that's what's wrong with this team.
I just get the feeling that Spurs have run out of ideas as much as energy. And the thing for me up against this Chelsea, when Spurs were in possession, Chelsea just sat deep. And so there wasn't an awful lot of space in and around the Chelsea box. And Spurs just had no way of unlocking Chelsea. Maybe an early season Maddison would have been the key to that. But ever since his return from injury, he hasn't hit the heights that we saw, particularly in the first half of the season. So now all of a sudden, you have, in tonight's case, a deep-sitting Chelsea defence and nobody with the creativity, nobody with that little cleverness in and around the box to unlock that defence. That, for me, is a concern, because the other parts to Spurs' game, we know they're very good at.
Gab?
I agree. I mean, I think games like these where you go a goal down, you got to get back into it, and the other team very clearly aims to play on the counter, and of course they should when you've got, you know, Mudryk, Madueke, and Jackson and their legs. You need that creativity to unlock the opposition, and obviously Maddison provides that, and he hasn't been providing it, which is presumably is part of the reason why he was benched. And you really felt that. Kulusevski through the middle is not the same thing. I think even somebody like Timo Werner, who, you know, we can giggle about his finishing, but, you know, can run at players and cause something, and sometimes with quality as well, compared to, say, Brennan Johnson, who generally just runs in straight lines, albeit he does so very, very quickly. You know, a lot of these things are missing. And it's interesting because I think this applies to set pieces too. Postecoglou is very big on giving the players responsibility for looking after each other, for being brave, for sort of spotting when your teammate makes a run forward, you cover that space. It goes out the window on the set pieces. But I think also we saw this tonight on some defensive situations. And I do think this team looks really, really tired. And when you consider they didn't have European football to contend with, that's got to be disappointing as well.
Stevie, when you look at these Chelsea players, how would you actually rate them? Because it is hard to judge them, because sometimes we see them playing very well and sometimes we don't.
I think right now you've got to judge them on what you see and what they do on the field in any particular game, because we know that they're inconsistent. And today you have to give them credit for defending with their lives, basically. You know, they stopped. I think one chance Brennan Johnson had at the far post where he completely made a mess of it. That's it. You've got to put that down to Chelsea defending as well as Tottenham not being sharp. So, yeah, I think you've got to give credit to Chelsea. I thought the first half they were by far the better side, got the goal, and it's about you know, a lot of the time when you're on top, you have to take your opportunities, and pretty much Chelsea did that, and Tottenham didn't have any answer for it. So I think you've got to praise Chelsea for the way they defended, and you've got to look at Tottenham and ask, as Gab, I think, agreed with me, why they've run out of juice.
Chelsea, praise for them tonight, Shaka, from you? Defensively,
absolutely, yes. And once they got that opening goal and were able to use the pace that they have, and again, once you kind of recognise that Spurs don't have what it takes to break it down defensively, the game then becomes very easy from there on in. Listen, we've seen Chelsea be as frustrating as, and I'm using as kind of word as I can, as any team in this league in terms of who they put out, the cost of their squad, and some of the inconsistencies around it. But on tonight's performance, they got everything right in terms of sitting deep on the break. I have to say, Mudryk continues to be, well, if you're a Chelsea fan, frustrating. If you're a total neutral, kind of amusing in all honesty. In very quick and able to stretch defenses. But then once he gets around that box, there is just this. You have no idea what you're going to get out of him. But he's unsettling, and at the very least, he did that for Spurs. So things kind of fell into place for Chelsea on the day.
Actually, Madueke's a bit the same on the other side. If the two of them can figure it out in that final third, then they'll be absolute dynamite. Because every time they get it, they make you sit up. Especially Mudryk. He makes you sit up because you're not quite sure. And Madueke's beginning to do that. He makes you sit up a little bit. If the two of them can start putting something on the end of all that, then they will be a handful.
As you mentioned Madueke, I thought he and Emerson Royal had a great battle running. And for some of the criticisms, at least going back, and again, that one-on-one, you know, that responsibility, I'm responsible for you, I know you're going to be responsible for me. I think players sometimes thrive in those conditions. And defensively, I thought that was a really good battle between the two and enjoyable to watch.
Gab, what were you laughing at?
No. When he was talking about Mudryk, it's not just his runs. He had one tremendous cross-field ball, very, very impressive. But then he has these runs where he runs into blind alley or loses the ball or slices it into the third tier. You know, I think the Chelsea project is predicated upon, you know, hoovering up all these exciting young players and assuming that enough of them are going to go to the next level. And when you watch them again tonight, you see moments, and it really takes a lot of faith that Mudryk's going to, you know, after he's been in the Premier League now for 18 months, you know, when is he going to harness that? Madueke, you want to give him a little more time, fine, but how high is Madueke's ceiling? Is Nico Jackson a viable starter on a team that wants to compete for the league, or will he always be, you know, a backup to a better center forward or an alternative or a guy like, I mean, certainly not wanting for effort, but, you know, how far is he from his ceiling? He's still very raw. They did defend well. Cole Palmer, I thought, had, by his standards, a quiet night, but, you know, did his job. But, you know, it's also because you take Conor Gallagher and you say, all right, Conor Gallagher, you know, run yourself into the ground alongside Moises Caicedo. And that, you know, coupled with a Spurs team that are ineffective, is what saw Chelsea over the line. But, you know, top to bottom, when you look at this, there aren't that many players where you feel confident. Yes, they're on the kind of upward trajectory that we were hoping for when we spent 100 million, 80 million, 50 million on these guys.
But what about the future of Mauricio Pochettino? He's been asked about that after tonight's game, and it comes hot on the heels of some big rumours about a shock return for Antonio Conte. Obviously, we know that was a dramatic exit from Chelsea. What are you hearing here, Gab? What more can you tell us?
I mean, look, we've seen Chelsea do 180s. We've seen Chelsea make a whole bunch of mistakes with their coaches and a lot of silliness. But I think even thinking of bringing Antonio Conte back to Chelsea, honestly, you know, if that happens, you really, I generally don't know. I wouldn't know what to say. I can think of very few managers who would be a worse fit for this Chelsea team right now than Antonio Conte. Not because he's not a good manager, but because his track record is what it is. He's somebody who excels when he can work with veteran players, with players who are fully formed, and then he can order them around and get them to play the way he wants. And, you know, he's usually successful, especially at first, and especially if you go and spend money to bring in the players he wants. I don't think that's an option for Chelsea. They made it very, very clear. This $1 billion that they spent is on these players to develop these players and to have them grow. So Conte would make no sense for me. I think Pochettino's made some mistakes this year, but man, that guy's got an absolute wagon load of mitigating circumstances, starting with all the injuries along the way. I thought Chelsea were going to be further along than where they are in terms of identity, in terms of patterns of play. They're not, and I think some of that is definitely Pochettino's fault. But equally, there are so many extenuating circumstances. I think it would be completely irrational to jettison Pochettino after the season.
A Conte return, Shaka. I see you laughing along there.
I'll tell you why I'm laughing. Because I agree fully, 100% with everything Gab had to say. Yet, because of how this club has been run for the last 2 years, it becomes entirely plausible. For that reason only. It makes no sense, and the way this club has done their business, you just think, oh, yep, that's the kind of thing they'll do. But again, as I say, in all seriousness, I am totally with Gab. This makes absolutely no sense on a number of levels. How this has become a thing, again, I suspect only a few people in the boardroom can answer to.
Listen, with young players, you need somebody with patience. I don't think Antonio Conte fits the bill. Patience.
Yeah, those young players might be staying sat on that bench if Antonio. Where is it actually coming from? It's Italian media outlets, right, Gab?
Yeah, and look, I don't want to go and crap on the work of certain specific colleagues who put the story out. I do think it's a very open secret that Antonio Conte wants to get back into management and wants to do so quickly. He's terrified of sitting out too long. There was a link with him and Napoli that didn't seem to work out. He's seeing the Milan job, probably Pioli going, and he's looking at this and they're linked with Lopetegui and Paulo Fonseca and De Zerbi, guys like that. And I can just imagine him pacing the room and being, hey, what about me? I actually won in Milan. I'm ready. I'm a champion. I'm this, I'm that. And I think this makes him really, really antsy and uncomfortable. He knows he can't go back to Juve. And he knows that his stock is where it is right now. So, sometimes having your name linked to a big club can maybe prompt others into action of saying, all right, if we were considering Conte, let's act quickly before something happens. That's the only explanation I can find here.